The Discovery Doctor, Sarah Chen, never expected her xenobiology research mission to the remote planet Dracoris Prime would lead to the most significant discovery in human history. The planet, located in the outer rim of the Andromeda sector, had been flagged for its unusual energy signatures and rare mineral deposits. What the initial surveys hadn't mentioned were the massive crystalline structures jutting from the planet's surface like frozen lightning bolts. The research station hummed quietly in the perpetual twilight of Dracoris Prime's binary star system. Sarah adjusted her environmental suit and stepped outside for her daily specimen collection. The air was breathable but thin, requiring supplemental oxygen for extended exposure. Strange bioluminescent fungi dotted the landscape, casting an ethereal blue glow across the rocky terrain. As she made her way toward a cluster of unusual plant formations, Sarah noticed something that made her freeze in place. In the shadow of a towering crystal formation, partially hidden beneath fallen debris, lay what appeared to be a massive egg-shaped structure. But this wasn't like any geological formation she'd studied. The surface was smooth, almost organic, with a pearlescent sheen that seemed to pulse with internal light. Moving closer, Sarah realized she was looking at an actual egg. An enormous one, nearly 3 meters in length and 2 meters wide. The shell appeared to be cracked with jagged splits running along its surface. Her scientific curiosity overrode her caution as she approached the mysterious object. The scanner readings were unlike anything in her database. The shell contained traces of unknown organic compounds, and thermal imaging revealed multiple heat sources within. As she documented her findings, a sound made her heart skip. A weak, mournful cry echoed from inside the egg, followed by another, then another. Something was alive in there, and it was calling for help. Sarah quickly returned to the research station and gathered her emergency xenobiology kit. Whatever was inside that egg, it needed assistance, and protocol dictated that she assess any potential threat level before making contact. However, the cries she'd heard didn't sound threatening. They sounded desperate, almost heartbroken. When she returned to the egg, the cracks had widened. Through the gaps, she could see movement inside. Taking a deep breath, Sarah carefully began clearing away the loose shell fragments. What she discovered inside changed everything she thought she knew about the universe. 3 small creatures lay curled together in the remnants of their shell. They were unlike anything in the galactic species database, roughly the size of house cats but with elongated necks and delicate, translucent wings folded against their sides. Their scales were pure white, almost transparent, giving them an ethereal appearance. Most striking were their eyes, large and intelligent, filled with what could only be described as profound sadness. The creatures were clearly newborns, their movements weak and uncoordinated. They made soft chirping sounds, turning their heads toward any noise or movement, searching for something that wasn't there. Sarah realized with growing horror that these were babies, and they were alone. Her translator device couldn't process their vocalizations, but she didn't need technology to understand their distress. They were calling for their mother, a mother who would never come. The egg showed signs of having been abandoned for some time, and there were no other adults of their species anywhere in the vicinity. As a xenobiologist, Sarah had studied countless species across the galaxy, but she'd never encountered anything quite like these creatures. Their anatomy suggested they were highly evolved, possibly even sapient. The bone structure visible through their translucent skin was complex, particularly around the skull region, indicating advanced brain development. The smallest of the 3 creatures, noticeably more pale than its siblings, struggled to lift its head. Its breathing was labored, and Sarah could see it was significantly weaker than the others. Without intervention, it might not survive much longer. Against all protocols, Sarah made a decision that would alter the course of human history. She carefully lifted the smallest creature, feeling its tiny heart beating rapidly against her gloved hands. The creature's skin was surprisingly warm, and as she held it close to her chest, its breathing seemed to steady. The other 2 creatures immediately became agitated, chirping frantically and trying to follow their sibling. Sarah realized they were bonded, possibly telepathically linked. Separating them could cause irreparable psychological damage. Making quick calculations, Sarah determined she could transport all 3 creatures back to the research station. Her environmental suit's heating system could provide warmth, and the station's medical bay was equipped to handle various alien physiologies. As she carefully gathered the 3 creatures, Wrapping them in her spare thermal blankets, Sarah noticed something remarkable. The moment she touched them, their distressed calls quieted. They seemed to recognize her as a potential caregiver, instinctively seeking the warmth and comfort of a parental figure. The journey back to the station was tense. The creatures remained quiet, huddled together in the makeshift carrier Sarah had fashioned from her equipment bag. She monitored their vital signs continuously, adjusting the temperature and oxygen mixture to keep them stable. Once inside the station, Sarah set up a temporary habitat in the medical bay. She installed heat lamps, created a soft bedding area, and began preparing a nutrient solution based on the biological analysis of their physiology. The creatures' digestive systems appeared designed for a liquid diet initially, similar to many Earth mammals. As night fell on Dracoris Prime, Sarah found herself sitting beside the three creatures, watching them sleep. They had instinctively arranged themselves in a protective circle, with the smallest in the center. Their scales shimmered softly in the dim light, and their breathing had synchronized into a peaceful rhythm. The implications of her discovery were staggering. These creatures were clearly intelligent, possibly the first non-humanoid sapient species humanity had encountered. They were also completely helpless, abandoned on a hostile world with no one to care for them. Sarah made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She would become their guardian, their protector, their surrogate mother. She had no idea that these three small creatures would grow to become humanity's greatest allies in a universe far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. As she drifted off to sleep in the chair beside their makeshift nest, Sarah felt a gentle weight against her leg. The smallest creature had somehow made its way over to her, curling up against her warmth. In her sleep, she instinctively reached down to comfort the tiny being, beginning a bond that would reshape the destiny of two species. The bond deepens. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah discovered the dragon hatchlings, and the research station had transformed into something resembling a nursery more than a scientific outpost. The creatures, whom Sarah had named Aurora, Frost, and Little Shimmer, had grown remarkably fast. They were now the size of medium dogs, their wings beginning to show the intricate membrane patterns that would eventually allow them to fly. The most surprising development was their obvious intelligence. Aurora, the largest and most assertive of the three, had begun mimicking Sarah's movements and even attempting to copy her speech patterns. The sounds were alien and musical, but there was definite intention behind them. Frost, the middle sibling, showed an incredible curiosity about technology, often watching intently as Sarah worked on her equipment. Shimmer, still the smallest and most fragile, had developed what could only be described as a psychic connection with Sarah. Every morning, Sarah woke to find Shimmer curled against her side, having somehow escaped from the enclosed habitat during the night. At first, she'd been concerned about security protocols, but it became clear that the little dragon was deeply bonded to her. When Sarah felt stressed or upset, Shimmer would become agitated. When she was happy, all three dragons seemed to radiate contentment. The breakthrough came during Sarah's 4th week alone with the creatures. She'd been struggling to decode some unusual mineral samples when she felt a gentle touch against her mind. It wasn't quite telepathy, more like an emotional echo. Images flashed through her consciousness, her own face seen from a low angle, feelings of safety and warmth, and something that could only be described as love. Looking down, Sarah found Shimmer gazing up at her with those large, intelligent eyes. The connection was unmistakable. The dragon was sharing its emotions with her, and somehow she was receiving them. This revelation led to a series of experiments that would have violated every xenobiology protocol in the book, but Sarah was far beyond caring about regulations. She began trying to communicate back, focusing on simple concepts and emotions. To her amazement, all three dragons responded. Aurora's eyes would brighten when Sarah projected feelings of pride and accomplishment. Frost became excited when she shared her curiosity about the world around them. And Shimmer seemed to absorb every emotion Sarah felt, responding with comfort when she was sad and playful energy when she was happy. The dragon's physical development was equally remarkable. Their scales had developed a natural luminescence, glowing softly in patterns that seemed to correspond to their emotional states. Aurora's scales pulsed with confident gold light. Frost's shimmered with curious blue patterns, and Shimmer's remained the palest, casting gentle silver light that seemed to respond to Sarah's presence. But it was their problem-solving abilities that truly amazed Sarah. When she accidentally dropped a datapad behind her workstation, Aurora and Frost worked together to retrieve it, with Aurora boosting Frost up to reach the narrow space. When the food dispenser malfunctioned, all three dragons gathered around it, examining the device with obvious intelligence before Aurora gently tapped a specific panel with her claw, somehow resetting the system. The dragons had also begun to fly, though their first attempts were more like controlled falls. Shimmer was the most cautious, preferring to glide short distances between Sarah's arms and nearby surfaces. Aurora was fearless, launching herself from increasingly high perches with reckless abandon. Frost took a methodical approach, studying the aerodynamics of each flight attempt before making careful adjustments. As their abilities developed, so did their personalities. Aurora emerged as the natural leader, protective of her siblings and increasingly watchful of Sarah. She would position herself between Sarah and any potential threat, even something as harmless as an equipment malfunction. Frost was the explorer, constantly investigating every corner of the station and bringing Sarah interesting objects she'd discovered. Shimmer remained the emotional heart of their small family, somehow knowing exactly when Sarah needed comfort or companionship. The most significant development came when Sarah received her first communication from Earth Command. The message was routine, requesting a status update on her research progress. As she prepared her response, Sarah faced a dilemma that would define her future relationship with both humanity and the dragons. Protocol demanded she report the discovery immediately. The dragons represented first contact with a clearly sapient alien species, something that would trigger massive military and scientific expeditions to Dracoris Prime. The dragons would be studied, tested, and likely separated for research purposes. They would become property of Earth Command, not the family they had become. Sarah looked at the three creatures playing together in their habitat, Aurora teaching Shimmer a new flying technique while Frost watched with analytical interest. They trusted her completely, had bonded with her as their parent and protector. The thought of handing them over to be experimented on made her physically ill. She began composing a carefully worded report that mentioned unusual fauna, but downplayed the significance of her discoveries. As she typed, Shimmer approached and gently touched her leg. The emotional connection flowed between them, and Sarah felt the dragon's trust and love. In that moment, she made a decision that would change everything. She deleted the report and began composing a different message, one that would buy her more time. She requested an extension of her research mission, citing promising mineral discoveries that required additional study. It wasn't entirely false. The planet's unique crystalline formations were scientifically significant, but her real research now focused on understanding and protecting the three beings who had become her family. That night, as Sarah lay in her bed with Shimmer curled against her side and Aurora and Frost sleeping nearby, she felt a sense of purpose she'd never experienced before. These creatures had chosen to trust her with their lives, and she would not betray that trust. She began planning for a future that seemed impossible, keeping the dragons safe while somehow preparing them for eventual contact with humanity. She would need to teach them about human nature, help them develop their abilities, and hope that when the time came, they would be strong enough to stand as equals rather than subjects. The bond between them had already grown beyond anything Sarah had thought possible. The dragons looked to her not just for food and shelter, but for guidance, love, and protection. In return, they offered her a connection to something greater than herself, a glimpse into a form of intelligence and emotion that was both alien and beautifully familiar. As sleep took her, Sarah felt Shimmer's contentment flowing through their bond. Joined by the protective presence of Aurora and the curious warmth of Frost, they were no longer just xenobiological specimens and researcher. They were family, and Sarah would do whatever it took to keep them safe. Growing stronger, 6 months had transformed the research station into something unrecognizable. What had once been a sterile scientific outpost now hummed with life, laughter, and the gentle music of dragon songs. Aurora, Frost, and Shimmer had grown to the size of large horses, their wings now capable of sustained flight around the station's perimeter. Their intelligence had developed at an exponential rate, far exceeding Sarah's most optimistic projections. The dragons had learned to understand human speech with remarkable fluency. Though their own language remained beautifully complex and musical, they could manipulate simple tools, operate basic computer interfaces, and had even learned to read human text, though they preferred the holographic displays that could incorporate their natural three-dimensional thinking patterns. Aurora had become the undisputed guardian of their small family. Her scales now pulsed with confident golden light, and she had developed an impressive array of abilities that seemed almost magical. She could generate controlled electromagnetic fields, allowing her to manipulate electronic devices without physical contact. More remarkably, she had learned to create protective barriers of crystallized air, a defensive capability that left Sarah speechless the first time she witnessed it. Frost had evolved into their resident scientist and engineer. His curiosity about human technology had led to an understanding of mechanical systems that rivaled Sarah's own expertise. He had actually improved several pieces of equipment around the station, his claws proving surprisingly adept at precision work. His scales shimmered with analytical blue patterns, and he had developed the ability to see electromagnetic spectrums beyond human perception, making him invaluable for detecting problems before they became serious. Shimmer remained the emotional center of their group, but her empathic abilities had grown beyond simple emotional connection. She could now project feelings across significant distances, and Sarah suspected she might be developing precognitive abilities. More than once, Shimmer had warned them of equipment failures or weather changes before any instruments detected problems. Her silver scales had developed intricate patterns that seemed to shift based on the emotional state of everyone around. The most significant development was the dragon's growing understanding of human nature and society. Sarah had begun showing them recordings from Earth, explaining human history, culture, and the complex political realities of interstellar civilization. The dragons absorbed this information with fascination and growing concern. They understood that their existence would fundamentally change the relationship between humans and the wider galaxy. As the first confirmed sapient alien species encountered by humanity, they would become symbols, representatives of their unknown race, and potentially targets for exploitation or worse. Sarah had been honest about the dangers they would face. Earth Command's protocols for first contact were designed primarily for human benefit. The dragons would be studied, their abilities tested and potentially weaponized, their freedom severely restricted. The military implications of their natural abilities had not been lost on any of them. Aurora's response to this knowledge was typically direct. She had begun training herself for combat, developing her electromagnetic abilities into formidable weapons. She could now generate focused energy pulses that could disable electronics or create barriers strong enough to stop projectile weapons. Her protective instincts had expanded beyond just their small family, to include a fierce determination to protect any of her kind they might encounter. Frost approached the problem with scientific methodology. He had begun studying human military technology, identifying weaknesses and developing countermeasures. His ability to see beyond normal visual spectrums made him exceptionally good at detecting hidden weapons or surveillance equipment. He had even begun designing modifications to the station's defensive systems, though Sarah worried about the implications of arming their home. Shimmer's response was the most subtle but potentially most powerful. She had begun practicing what could only be called diplomatic empathy, learning to project feelings of peace and understanding. During Sarah's more stressful moments, Shimmer would calm her with waves of serenity that left her feeling centered and optimistic. If this ability could work on other humans, it might be their most valuable tool for peaceful first contact. The turning point came when Sarah received an unexpected communication from Earth Command. Her research extension was being cut short due to budget constraints, and a retrieval ship would arrive within 3 months to bring her home. The message included subtle hints that her recent reports had raised questions about her mental state and scientific objectivity. Sarah realized that her attempts to hide the dragon's existence had backfired. The deliberately vague reports and requests for extensions had made Earth Command suspicious. They were sending a ship not just to retrieve her, but to investigate what she was really doing on Dracoris Prime. When she shared this news with the dragons, their responses revealed how much they had grown and learned. Aurora immediately began planning defensive strategies, while Frost started calculating the technological capabilities of an Earth Command retrieval ship. Shimmer simply moved closer to Sarah, offering emotional support while beginning to project calming influences toward all of them. But it was Aurora who proposed the solution that would define their future. Instead of hiding or running, they would face Earth Command directly. The dragons would reveal themselves, but on their own terms, as equals seeking alliance rather than subjects awaiting study. The plan they developed over the following weeks was audacious and dangerous. They would allow the Earth Command ship to land, then reveal the dragon's existence in a carefully controlled first contact scenario. Sarah would serve as translator and advocate, while the dragons would demonstrate their intelligence, abilities, and desire for peaceful cooperation. The risks were enormous. Earth Command protocols called for immediate quarantine of any alien species, followed by extensive study and evaluation. The military potential of the dragon's abilities could trigger aggressive responses, but the alternative was a life of hiding, and the dragons had inherited humanity's preference for meeting challenges head-on. As they prepared for first contact, Sarah marveled at how much had changed since that first night when she'd found 3 helpless hatchlings and a broken egg. The creatures sleeping around her now were formidable beings, capable of incredible feats and possessed of wisdom that seemed far beyond their young age. Aurora had positioned herself near the station's main entrance, her golden scales pulsing with determination. Frost was running final diagnostics on the communication systems he'd modified to better accommodate dragon vocalizations. Shimmer remained close to Sarah, their emotional bond stronger than ever, ready to project whatever feelings might help the coming negotiations. The dragons had grown from helpless orphans into powerful individuals, but they had never forgotten the human who had saved them. They understood that the approaching confrontation would determine not just their own fate, but the future relationship between their species and humanity. Sarah felt a mixture of pride and terror as she watched her adopted children prepare for the most important moment in human history. Whatever happened when that Earth Command ship arrived, she knew the universe would never be the same again. First contact, the ECS Harbinger descended through Dracoris Prime's atmosphere like a metallic storm cloud, its military-grade engines casting harsh shadows across the crystalline landscape. Sarah watched from the observation deck as the massive ship settled onto the designated landing pad, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Beside her, Aurora, Frost, and Shimmer maintained their composure, but she could feel their tension through the empathic bond they now all shared. Commander Marcus Webb emerged from the ship with a full diplomatic and scientific team, but Sarah noticed the heavy presence of military personnel and advanced scanning equipment. This was not a routine extraction mission. Earth Command clearly suspected something significant was happening on Dracoris Prime. The initial meeting took place in the station's main conference room, with the dragons carefully hidden in the adjacent chamber. Commander Webb was a career military officer with piercing blue eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. His team included Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenobiologist who had written several papers criticizing Sarah's recent research methods, and Captain James Morrison, whose cybernetic enhancements marked him as Special Forces. Dr. Chen, Commander Webb began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to obedience. Your recent reports have raised significant concerns at Earth Command. Your research data has been inconsistent, your requests for extensions unprecedented, and several of your colleagues have questioned your psychological state. Sarah had rehearsed this moment countless times, but facing the reality of potentially condemning her adopted children to a life of experimentation made her mouth dry. Commander, I can explain everything. But first, I need you to understand that what I'm about to show you will change humanity's place in the universe forever. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward, her expression skeptical. Sarah, if you've made a significant discovery, why haven't you followed proper reporting protocols? The Xenobiology Department has been kept completely in the dark about your activities here. Through the empathic bond, Sarah felt Shimmer's gentle encouragement, Aurora's protective strength, and Frost's analytical calm. The dragons were ready. It was time to change the course of history. Because, Sarah said, standing slowly, some discoveries require careful handling. Commander, you're about to become part of humanity's first peaceful contact with a confirmed sapient alien species. The silence that followed was deafening. Captain Morrison's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon, while Dr. Vasquez's scanner immediately activated. Commander Webb's expression shifted from skepticism to alert attention. That's impossible, Dr. Vasquez said firmly. There are no confirmed sapient species outside the humanoid classifications. If such a species existed on Dracoris Prime, our surveys would have detected them. Sarah moved toward the chamber door. They weren't here during the surveys. They were eggs, abandoned and dying. I found 3 hatchlings who needed help, and I made a choice that changed all our lives. She opened the door and Aurora stepped through first, her massive form filling the doorway. Her golden scales pulsed with controlled power, and her intelligent eyes swept the room, assessing each human present. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Captain Morrison's weapon was drawn before Aurora had fully entered the room, while Dr. Vasquez stumbled backward, her scanner overwhelmed by readings it couldn't categorize. Commander Webb remained seated, but his knuckles were white as he gripped the table edge. "Stand down," Sarah commanded, moving protectively toward Aurora. "They are not hostile. Aurora, show them you understand." Aurora's voice filled the room, musical and alien but clearly structured as language. Then, to everyone's amazement, she spoke in accented but perfectly understandable English. "Greetings, Commander Webb. I am Aurora. My siblings and I wish to speak with your people about cooperation and mutual understanding." The weapon fell from Captain Morrison's nerveless fingers. Dr. Vasquez's scanner was now emitting continuous warning beeps as it tried to process readings that defied every known category of life. Commander Webb slowly rose from his chair, his military training warring with the impossibility of what he was witnessing. Frost and Shimmer entered the room together, their blue and silver scales creating a spectacular light display. Frost carried a data pad that he had modified with his own claws, while Shimmer remained close to Sarah, projecting waves of calm that gradually began to affect the stunned humans. "This is impossible," Dr. Vasquez whispered, but her scientific curiosity was already overcoming her shock. The bone structure, the neural development, the obvious tool use. "They're clearly sapient, but they're not in any of our databases." Commander Webb found his voice. "Dr. Chen, you've violated every first contact protocol in existence. These beings should have been reported immediately. The military implications alone." Aurora's scales flashed with warning gold as she responded. "Commander, we understand your protocols. Sarah has taught us about human law and military procedures. We chose to remain hidden because we needed time to grow strong enough to meet you as equals, not subjects for experimentation." The intelligence behind Aurora's words was unmistakable, but it was Frost who delivered the statement that changed everything. He activated his modified data pad, displaying a 3-dimensional hologram of the research station's defensive systems. "We have analyzed your ship's capabilities, Commander Webb. Your weapons are impressive, but we have developed countermeasures. We do not wish conflict, but we will defend ourselves if necessary. Sarah saved our lives when we were helpless. Now we choose to save hers by revealing ourselves before you could force the issue." The hologram showed modifications to the station's systems that were clearly beyond human technology. Energy barriers, electromagnetic pulse generators, and defensive matrices that could neutralize most military equipment. The dragons had not been hiding in fear. They had been preparing. Shimmer finally spoke, her voice gentler than her siblings but no less compelling. "We feel your emotions, Commander. Fear, wonder, and calculation. We do not blame you for these feelings, but we hope you will also feel what we project to you." A wave of empathy washed over the room, allowing the humans to experience a fraction of what the dragons felt. Love for Sarah, who had saved them from death. Curiosity about humanity and desire for friendship. Strength and determination to protect their family. And underneath it all, a deep wisdom that seemed far older than their young bodies should possess. Commander Webb slowly sat down, his mind reeling from the implications. "You're saying these dragons, they're not just intelligent, they're technologically advanced?" Sarah nodded. "They learn faster than any species we've ever encountered. In 6 months, they've mastered human technology and improved upon it. They understand our culture, our history, and our potential for both cooperation and conflict." Dr. Vasquez was circling Aurora with scientific fascination, her scanner recording everything. "The neural complexity is incredible. The brain-to-body ratio suggests intelligence levels that could rival or exceed human capabilities. And the natural abilities, electromagnetic manipulation, empathic projection, they're like nothing in our xenobiology databases." Captain Morrison had recovered his composure but remained wary. "Commander, if they can modify our technology and neutralize our weapons, they represent a significant security threat. Protocol demands immediate containment and study." Aurora's response was swift and decisive. Her scales blazed with golden light as electromagnetic energy crackled around her claws. The room's electronic systems flickered and dimmed as she demonstrated her power. Captain Morrison, we are not threats to be contained. We are potential allies offering partnership. Your protocols were written by humans who had never encountered beings like us. Perhaps it is time for new protocols. Commander Webb looked around the room, taking in the incredible scene. 3 magnificent alien beings, clearly sapient and technologically capable, offering cooperation while demonstrating they could not be simply captured and studied. A human scientist who had risked her career to protect them, and technology that could revolutionize human understanding of physics and biology. Dr. Chen, he said finally, you've created a situation that's going to require decisions far above my authority level. These dragons, they're going to change everything. Sarah felt relief flooding through the empathic bond as Shimmer's calming influence continued to work on the humans. The first moments of contact had passed without violence, and the dragons had successfully established themselves as equals rather than subjects. Commander, Sarah said, that's exactly what they hope to achieve. They don't want to be humanity's subjects or enemies. They want to be our partners in exploring a universe that's far stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. The revelation. The emergency council session aboard the ECS Harbinger stretched into its 3rd day, with heated debates echoing through the ship's corridors. Commander Webb had transmitted his initial report to Earth Command, triggering an unprecedented response. Fleet Admiral Zhang herself was en route with a full diplomatic and military expedition, while xenobiology teams across human space prepared for the most significant discovery in galactic history. Sarah sat in the ship's observation lounge with Aurora, Frost and Shimmer, watching the political storm unfold through the transparent aluminum windows. The dragons had agreed to remain aboard the Harbinger as guests rather than prisoners, a distinction that required constant reinforcement with increasingly paranoid military personnel. They're afraid of us, Shimmer observed, her empathic abilities providing constant feedback about the crew's emotional state. Not just fear of the unknown, but fear of being inferior. Aurora's golden scales pulsed with irritation. Their fear makes them dangerous. I've counted 17 different weapon systems aboard this ship, and Captain Morrison has tripled the security rotation around our quarters. Frost was more analytical in his assessment. The humans are experiencing what they call cognitive dissonance. Their entire understanding of their place in the universe has been challenged. They believe themselves to be the dominant sapient species in this galaxy, and we represent evidence that they may be wrong. Sarah nodded grimly. That's exactly the problem. Humanity has always defined itself by its uniqueness. We're the only species that develop faster than light travel, the only ones with advanced technology, the only ones building interstellar civilizations. Finding out that 3 baby dragons can master our technology in months rather than centuries, it's threatening everything we believe about ourselves. The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Vasquez entering the lounge, her expression mixing scientific excitement with obvious nervousness. Over the past 3 days, she had become the dragon's primary human contact, conducting countless interviews and examinations that had fundamentally changed her understanding of xenobiology. Sarah, dragons, I have news from Earth Command. Fleet Admiral Zhang has accelerated her arrival schedule. She'll be here within 2 days, along with representatives from the Galactic Council, the Terraforming Authority, and she paused, her expression darkening, the Strategic Weapons Division. Aurora rose to her full height, electromagnetic energy crackling around her claws. Weapons Division. Are they planning to study us as potential weapons or to develop weapons against us? Probably both, Dr. Vasquez admitted reluctantly. Your abilities represent a paradigm shift in military thinking, electromagnetic manipulation that can disable entire fleets, empathic projection that could prevent conflicts, and technological adaptation that could revolutionize our understanding of engineering. There are factions within Earth Command that see you as the solution to humanity's expansion problems. Frost's analytical mind immediately grasped the implications. They want to weaponize our abilities and use us to subjugate other species they encounter. This is why Aurora insisted we develop defensive capabilities. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent alarm. Commander Webb's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. All hands to stations. Unknown vessels detected approaching our position. Configuration and origin unidentified. Sarah felt her blood freeze as the implications hit her. Through the observation windows, she could see three massive ships materializing from hyperspace. Their design unlike anything in human databases. The vessels were organic in appearance, with crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with internal light. Aurora, Frost, and Shimmer reacted with an intensity that Sarah had never seen before. Their scales blazed with brilliant light as they pressed against the windows, making sounds that were part song, part cry of recognition. "Those are our people," Aurora breathed, her voice filled with emotion Sarah had never heard from the composed dragon. "Those are draconic ships." The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow. The dragons hadn't been abandoned at all. They had been lost, and now their people had found them. Commander Webb burst into the lounge, his face pale. "Dr. Chen, we need the dragons on the bridge immediately. Those ships, they're not responding to our communications, but they're powering weapon systems that our computers can't even categorize." Aurora turned to face the commander, her golden eyes blazing with power and purpose. "Commander Webb, you are about to learn why the Draconic Empire has remained hidden from your species until now. We are not refugees seeking protection. We are the children of a civilization that spans thousands of star systems." As they made their way to the bridge, Shimmer provided emotional context through her empathic abilities. The approaching ships contained dragons who were desperately searching for their lost children, and they were prepared to destroy any threat to their offspring's safety. The bridge of the Harbinger was in chaos. Sensor readings were showing impossible energy signatures from the alien vessels, while communication attempts were met with silence. Captain Morrison was coordinating defensive maneuvers, but it was clear that the human ship was completely outclassed. Frost immediately moved to the communication console, his claws dancing over the controls with practiced precision. "Commander, allow me to establish contact. They will recognize our biosignatures and stand down their weapons." A musical sound filled the bridge as Frost transmitted a complex, draconic greeting. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The alien ship's weapons powered down, and return communications flooded the frequency with what could only be described as joyful songs. Aurora joined her brother at the communication station, adding her voice to the transmission. The emotional weight of the moment was palpable as the three young dragons spoke with their people for the first time since hatching. Shimmer moved to Sarah's side, projecting waves of gratitude and love that brought tears to her human guardian's eyes. Through the empathic bond, Sarah could feel the dragons' joy at reconnecting with their species, but also their fierce loyalty to the human who had saved their lives. The largest of the alien ships began moving closer, and through the main view screen the crew of the Harbinger could see figures moving within the crystalline structures. These were adult dragons, massive beings whose presence radiated power and ancient wisdom. "Commander Webb," Aurora announced, her voice carrying new authority. "I am Aurora, daughter of the Draconic Empire. Speaking for my siblings Frost and Shimmer, our people have come to retrieve us, but we will not leave without ensuring the safety of our human guardian and establishing proper diplomatic relations between our species." Commander Webb sank into his command chair, the full magnitude of the situation finally clear. Dr. Chen didn't just discover three alien beings. She saved the children of an advanced galactic civilization. Through the view screen, they watched as an elegant shuttle separated from the lead ship, moving toward the Harbinger with fluid grace. The shuttle's design was breathtaking, appearing to be grown rather than built, with organic curves and crystalline windows that sparkled with internal light. "The delegation approaching us includes my mother, Empress Celestia of the Northern Reaches, and 2 members of the Draconic High Council," Aurora explained. "They wish to meet the human who protected their children, and to discuss the future relationship between our species." Sarah felt a mixture of terror and awe as she realized she was about to meet the rulers of an alien empire. The 3 dragons she had raised from helpless hatchlings were royalty, and their rescue had just triggered first contact between humanity and a civilization that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. As the shuttle docked with the Harbinger, Aurora turned to Sarah with an expression of fierce protectiveness. "Mother, you saved us when we were defenseless and raised us with love and wisdom. Now we will ensure that our people understand the value of humanity and the potential for alliance between our species." The airlock cycled open, and Sarah found herself face to face with beings that embodied majesty and power beyond human comprehension. But through the empathic bond with Shimmer, she also felt their gratitude, their curiosity about the species that had protected their children, and their hope for a future that neither civilization could achieve alone. Alliance of Trust Empress Celestia was magnificent beyond human imagination. Standing nearly 4 meters tall, her scales shimmered with colors that seemed to shift between dimensions, creating patterns of light that were simultaneously beautiful and impossible to focus on directly. Her presence filled the Harbinger's main conference room with an aura of ancient wisdom and barely contained power. Beside her stood Council Elder Pyros, whose deep crimson scales seemed to hold the light of dying stars, and Council Elder Luna, whose silver-white coloration reminded Sarah painfully of Little Shimmer. These were beings who had lived for millennia, who had guided an empire across thousands of star systems, and who now sat across a conference table from a handful of humans trying to process the magnitude of this moment. Aurora, Frost, and Shimmer had positioned themselves between the human delegation and their people, serving as translators not just of language but of culture and intention. Through her empathic bond with Shimmer, Sarah could feel the complex emotions flowing through the room, the Empress's fierce maternal love and gratitude, the Council Elder's curiosity and caution, and underneath it all, a deep sadness that Sarah couldn't quite understand. Dr. Sarah Chen, the Empress spoke, her voice resonating with harmonics that seemed to vibrate through Sarah's bones. My children have told me of your kindness and sacrifice. You found them dying and chose to save them, despite the risks to yourself and your people's protocols. Sarah struggled to find words adequate to the moment. Your Majesty, they were babies who needed help. Any decent person would have done the same. Elder Pyros leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying Sarah intently. Any decent person, perhaps. But would any person have raised them with such love that they chose to reveal themselves to protect you? Would any person have taught them not just to survive, but to understand the value of peace and cooperation? Through the empathic bond, Sarah felt Shimmer's gentle correction of the translation, adding emotional context that pure language couldn't convey. The dragons weren't just grateful for being saved. They were fundamentally changed by having been raised by humans, and that change was what their people found most remarkable. Commander Webb had remained largely silent, but now he found his voice. Your Majesty, with respect, we need to understand the implications of this contact. Are there other draconic civilizations? What is your relationship with the known galaxy? Elder Luna's response was tinged with ancient sadness. Commander Webb, your species has been expanding through space for several of your centuries, believing yourselves to be alone among the stars. We have watched your progress with interest, occasionally guiding events to prevent your destruction, but never revealing ourselves. Aurora translated her elder's words with additional context. Commander, the Draconic Empire has existed for over 50,000 Earth years. We have encountered hundreds of sapient species, many of which destroyed themselves through warfare, environmental collapse, or simply the inability to cooperate with others. Frost added his analytical perspective. Humanity represents something unusual, Commander. Most species that achieve interstellar travel do so through conquest and exploitation. Your species has shown remarkable adaptability and cooperation, despite your capacity for violence. The revelation that humanity had been secretly observed and occasionally protected was staggering, but it was Empress Celestia's next words that truly changed everything. Dr. Chen, your species stands at a crossroads. Within your lifetime, you will encounter forces that could destroy human civilization entirely. The galaxy contains threats that even the Draconic Empire struggles to contain. We have remained hidden not from fear, but because we have learned that revealing ourselves too early often leads to the destruction of younger species. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. What kind of threats? Elder Pyros gestured, and a holographic display filled the center of the conference room. It showed a map of the galaxy with vast dark regions that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. The Devourers, he explained grimly. Ancient beings that consume entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty space. They sleep for millennia, then wake to feed. Our calculations suggest they will begin stirring within the next 50 years. The hologram shifted to show mechanical constructs of impossible complexity. The assimilators who view all organic life as inefficient and seek to convert every living being into extensions of their collective consciousness. A third image appeared, showing energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. The Chaos Lords, beings from dimensional spaces adjacent to our own, who view physical reality as a game to be manipulated for their amusement. Commander Webb's face had gone pale. And humanity is supposed to face these threats? Shimmer spoke for the first time since her people's arrival, her gentle voice carrying absolute conviction. Not alone, Commander. That is why we revealed ourselves. That is why Sarah's kindness was so important. She showed us that humans can choose cooperation over exploitation, protection over profit. Aurora's golden scales blazed with determination. The Draconic Empire has the technology and experience to fight these threats. But we lack something crucial that humanity possesses: the ability to inspire other species to unity rather than submission. Frost provided the analytical framework. Commander, in 50,000 years of galactic observation, we have never encountered a species that naturally forms alliances based on mutual benefit rather than dominance hierarchies. Humans are unique in your capacity for what you call friendship with equals. Empress Celestia nodded approvingly at her children's explanations. Dr. Chen, when our young ones were lost, we searched desperately but could not locate them in time. We assumed they had perished, as so many others have when their eggs are damaged or displaced. That you not only saved them but raised them to become bridges between our species. This was not coincidence. This was destiny. The weight of cosmic responsibility settled over Sarah like a physical burden. You're saying that 3 abandoned eggs led to humanity's first contact with a galactic empire, because the universe needed us to work together against these threats? Elder Luna's silver scales shimmered with something that might have been humor. Dr. Chen, the universe rarely reveals its purposes so clearly. But when a xenobiologist finds dragon eggs at the exact moment when both species need each other most, some might call that destiny. Others might simply call it good timing. Dr. Vasquez had been recording everything, her scientific mind racing to process the implications. Your Majesty, you're describing threats that could end all life in the galaxy. How does humanity even begin to prepare for something like that? The answer came from Shimmer, whose empathic abilities had been monitoring not just the emotional state of everyone present, but the deep currents of feeling that connected all living beings across space. Dr. Vasquez, the threats are real and terrible, but they are not invincible. The Devourers fear coordinated resistance from multiple species. The Assimilators cannot process emotional bonds that transcend logic. The Chaos Lords lose interest when faced with genuine cooperation rather than conflict. Aurora stood, her massive form radiating confidence and power. Humanity's greatest strength is not your technology or your weapons. It is your ability to make allies out of strangers, to build trust where none existed before. Sarah proved this when she chose to protect us rather than study us. Commander Webb looked around the room, taking in the magnitude of what was being proposed. You're talking about humanity becoming part of a galactic alliance against cosmic-level threats. The political implications alone, Empress Celestia's response carried the weight of millennia of experience. Commander Webb, politics become irrelevant when faced with extinction. The choice before your species is simple. Learn to work with allies who can help you grow strong enough to survive, or face the coming darkness alone. Sarah felt the truth of those words resonating through the empathic bond with Shimmer. The universe was vast and dangerous, filled with wonders and terrors beyond human imagination, but it was also filled with potential allies, with species like the dragons who had been waiting for someone like humanity to help them build something greater than any single civilization could achieve alone. As the formal negotiations began, Sarah looked at Aurora, Frost, and Shimmer with pride and love. The 3 helpless hatchlings she had found in a broken egg had grown to become the bridge between 2 civilizations that might just be able to save the galaxy together. Legacy of Hope 5 years had passed since first contact, and the Terran Draconic Alliance had fundamentally transformed both civilizations. Sarah stood on the observation deck of New Haven Station, humanity's first joint construction project with the Dragons, watching as ships from dozens of species docked at the massive facility orbiting the binary star system of Dracoris Prime. The station itself was a marvel of combined engineering, blending human ingenuity with draconic artistry and the technological contributions of 17 other allied species. Crystalline spires stretched toward the stars, connected by flowing metallic corridors that seemed to breathe with organic life. It served as both a diplomatic center and a training facility for the greatest challenge the galaxy had ever faced: Aurora approached through the corridors with confident grace, her golden scales now bearing intricate patterns that marked her as a diplomatic ambassador of the first rank. She had grown even larger over the years, nearly matching her mother's impressive size, but her eyes still held the warmth Sarah remembered from their first meeting. "Mother," Aurora said, using the term she had always reserved for Sarah, "the final preparations are complete. The fleet departs for the outer dark in 6 hours." Sarah turned from the viewport, her hair now touched with silver but her eyes bright with purpose. She wore the insignia of the Alliance's chief xenodiplomat, a position created specifically for her unique relationship with multiple species. "Are you ready for this, Aurora? Leading the diplomatic corps into unknown space?" Aurora's scales pulsed with calm determination. "Sarah, you taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Today, I choose to act for the future of all our peoples." Through the corridors, Frost arrived with his characteristic analytical precision. His blue scales had developed complex geometric patterns that marked his rank as Chief Technology Integration Officer. Behind him floated a holographic display showing the current status of the expedition fleet. "Sarah, Aurora, the final diagnostic reports are complete. We have successfully integrated technology from 23 different species into our defensive and exploration systems. The fleet is as ready as we can make it." The expedition they were preparing for represented the culmination of 5 years of unprecedented cooperation. The Alliance had grown from the initial human-dragon partnership to include the crystalline Viridians, the energy-based luminals, the hive-minded collective species, and dozens of others. Each brought unique abilities and perspectives to the greatest challenge in galactic history. The Devourers had begun stirring ahead of schedule, their first scout ships appearing at the galaxy's edge 18 months earlier than predicted. While the Alliance fleet prepared for the primary confrontation, advanced teams were already engaging in skirmishes that tested every innovation they had developed together. Shimmer materialized from the shadows with the ghostly grace she had perfected over the years. Her silver scales now seemed to phase in and out of visibility, as her empathic abilities had evolved into something approaching telepathic omnipresence. She served as the Alliance's chief emotional coordinator, helping maintain psychological stability across the massive multi-species fleet. "The crew emotional assessments are complete," she reported, her voice carrying harmonics that instinctively calmed anyone who heard it. "Fear levels are manageable, determination is high, and the interspecies bonds are holding strong. Most importantly, hope remains our dominant emotional signature." Sarah felt a surge of pride as she looked at the 3 beings she had raised from helpless hatchlings. They had become leaders in their own right, respected across the galaxy for their unique perspective and unwavering dedication to peaceful cooperation. But they were no longer her only children. The success of the initial human-dragon bonding had led to an unprecedented program of interspecies adoption and cultural exchange. Throughout the Alliance, human families were raising young dragons, while dragon clutches included human children who grew up learning to communicate through empathic bonds. Other species had joined the program, creating a generation of truly galactic citizens who thought in terms of cooperation rather than competition. Commander Webb, now Admiral Webb and Supreme Commander of Alliance military forces, joined them on the observation deck. His once pristine uniform now bore the honors and decorations of 17 different species, and his eyes held the wisdom of someone who had learned to see beyond human limitations. "Dr. Chen, dragons, the final diplomatic clearances have been received. The Galactic Council has voted unanimously to support our mission. Even the isolationist factions have agreed that the Devourer threat supersedes all political considerations." Sarah nodded, but her attention was drawn to the viewport where a familiar shuttle was approaching. Empress Celestia had come to see the expedition off personally, bringing with her the formal blessings of the Draconic Empire and several artifacts that might prove crucial in the coming confrontation. As the Empress joined their group, Sarah marveled at how natural it had become to stand in conference with beings who represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization. The terrified xenobiologist who had once hidden 3 baby dragons from her own government seemed like a different person entirely. "Dr. Chen," the Empress said formally, "the Empire's archives have provided additional intelligence about Devourer psychology. They are not simply destructive forces. They are ancient beings driven by a hunger that has consumed them for millions of years. If there is any possibility of communication, of finding an alternative to endless warfare, it will require the empathic abilities that your children have pioneered. Shimmer's scales flickered with complex emotions. Empress, I have been practicing extending my awareness across vast distances. If the Devourers retain any connection to their original nature, I may be able to establish contact. But the psychic trauma of touching minds that have known only hunger for eons? Aurora moved protectively toward her sister. You won't face that alone, Shimmer. We've learned to combine our abilities. My electromagnetic fields can provide shielding, while Frost's analytical capabilities help filter the emotional feedback. Frost added his perspective with characteristic precision. The probability of successful communication is low, but the potential benefits justify the risk. If we can find an alternative to total war, millions of worlds and trillions of lives could be saved. Admiral Webb activated his command communicator. All ships, this is Supreme Command. Begin final departure preparations. We launch in 1 hour. As the group prepared to board their respective ships, Sarah took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. What had begun with 3 abandoned eggs had grown into an alliance that spanned the galaxy, bringing together species that had never dreamed of cooperation. Aurora approached Sarah one final time before departure. Mother, regardless of what we face in the outer dark, I want you to know that saving us that night changed more than just our lives. You showed the galaxy that kindness has power, that protection is stronger than exploitation, and that love can bridge any gap between different forms of life. Frost joined his sister, his analytical mind providing the strategic context. Sarah, the mathematical probability of our successful mission has increased by 347% due to the alliance bonds you helped establish. Your decision to save 3 dragon hatchlings may have saved galactic civilization. Shimmer's contribution was characteristically emotional and profound. Mother, through our empathic bond, I can feel the hopes and dreams of every being in this fleet. They fight not just for survival, but for the future you helped us all envision. A galaxy where differences are celebrated rather than feared, where every species contributes their unique gifts to the common good. As the 3 dragons prepared to board their flagship, Sarah felt the weight of cosmic responsibility that had become familiar over the years. But she also felt something more important, the absolute certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The expedition fleet began moving toward the jump gates that would carry them beyond the galaxy's edge, toward a confrontation that would determine the fate of all known life. But they carried with them something the Devourers had never encountered: the combined strength of dozens of species united not by conquest or necessity, but by the simple recognition that all life was precious and worth protecting. Sarah watched from the observation deck as the fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying her adopted children and their allies toward destiny. In her hands she held a small crystal that contained recordings of that first night on Dracoris Prime, when 3 helpless hatchlings had changed the course of galactic history simply by trusting a human who chose to care for them. The universe was vast and dangerous, filled with ancient threats and cosmic horrors, but it was also filled with hope, with the possibility that even the smallest act of kindness could grow into something powerful enough to save everything that mattered. As the last ship disappeared into hyperspace, Sarah whispered a prayer to whatever cosmic forces had guided her to that broken egg so many years ago. Bring them home safe. All of them. The stars continued their eternal dance unchanged by the struggles of mortals. But somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, the greatest alliance in cosmic history moved forward with